Welcome to the Living Well Church podcast, and thanks for tuning in today. Our mission as a church is to help people find faith in Jesus and a life of purpose and hope. You're about to watch a message that will challenge you, inspire you, encourage you, and most of all, point you to Jesus and the life of purpose and hope He has planned for you. So lean in and enjoy, and let God speak into your life.
Hello. So we're looking, as we continue to look at Belong and Serve and Grow, we're also looking at things that really excite or encourage us about Jesus. What a huge topic to pick something from. So I really tried to narrow it down, and I think I've just got one thing I'm going to share with you today, one thing that really excites me about Jesus. I don't know when you were last excited. So I nearly got excited when it looked like England weren't going to have a total whitewash for the Ashes. But I mean, we only just didn't have a total whitewash. I remember being excited this morning, actually. So I was thinking, I was quite excited this morning when I heard this little voice shout from a cot, "Grandad, I'm here, get me." And I thought, and it made me really excited to have a little grandchild in the house. I asked Richard, my husband, who just took communion, I asked him one evening this week, when was the last time he was excited or really happy? And I thought, because he's quite miserable, I thought he'd really struggle to think. And straight away he went, this evening when I rode my bike home from work, I thought, should have thought of that. So he's easy to please because he goes on his motorbike all the time. Last time he was excited. I remember a couple of summers ago, my son Jack, who is also generally not the most exciting person, not quite as miserable as his dad, but he doesn't sort of necessarily have all this exuberance. Well, he rang me up from a church conference, all right? Now, you have to know a little bit about mine and Jack's relationship. I do all the giving, he does all the taking. Is that right, Jack? Yeah, he is agreeing. So for me to get a call from him, I'm expecting I've run out of money while I'm away, or can you go and wash some clothes ready for me or whatever. Oh no, his sister does that for me. And instead, I got this super excited son on the phone. I mean, he was up here. He was so excited because he was having this amazing time at Hillside. But why he'd rung me was he had to hold the phone up so I could hear, because Graham Kendrick was there, which, for a lad in his early 20s is a little odd. But Graham Kendrick was singing live to Jack, and he was so excited he had to ring his mother to share it. So I don't know what excites you. I also, last one, I was really excited. We host a life group, Park Nasilla Life Group, and this Tuesday when we had life group, I was really excited. Emotionally excited. In fact, I get emotional thinking about it because we have really good times of prayer. For those who don't know, our average age of our life group, if you take Richard and I out of it, is about 22. If you put us in it, it knocks it up. And we have good times of prayer. Well, the prayer time just went on and on and on. And the guys were just in with their prayers. And then at the end of it, somebody said, "That's the first time I prayed out loud," didn't you? And I was so excited because God is moving in that group of people. So I don't know what inspires you and what excites you, but I really hope Jesus does. I really hope He does, because there is so much about Jesus to inspire us. And what I'm going to talk about today is, I love how Jesus takes everybody and is willing to choose them and to use them. In Jesus, variety is great. There isn't one criteria when we read about who Jesus chose to be in His family. There isn't one type of person who can belong to Jesus and belong to the kingdom of God. Because it's horrible when you don't belong, isn't it? I don't know how many of you have got really bad childhood memories of not fitting in, or maybe not being chosen, not being good enough, maybe just not looking right, or not being in the in crowd, maybe not being the best at anything. Those of you that love sport but never ever got to play in the school team, Or even worse, just when it was, two lots of people, two teams on the playground, you always been the last one to be chosen. Oh, you're over there then. Maybe, I actually was thinking about this. I remember really, really little playing that game about the farmers in his den. I always wanted to be the wife. And then you end up being the dog at the end, and everybody's whacking the dog. Maybe being stood at the school disco because you're not in the in crowd and you're stood all on your own. But even as adults, sometimes it's really hard to fit in and to belong. Or we think we haven't reached something that we want to. You don't get picked at work for that promotion. You actually live your life feeling quite isolated, lonely and alone, or not being good enough. And actually, I think most of us don't like being the odd one out. We actually want to be part of something. We want to feel loved, special, and to belong. And belonging really matters to us. And what's amazing about Jesus is that the normal way of our life is, they say birds of a feather flock together. People go in little groups. And that's not how Jesus chooses people. Jesus chooses such a wide grouping of people to use for him and for his kingdom. And that's what I love about that thought, is that Jesus, when we see things through his eyes, when we look through his perspective, it's different to the world. Different to the world, and it's different in this way, that when Jesus looked and thought, right, I'm ready now to start my active ministry, he looked and he thought, I need some special people to join me. And he handpicks 12 of them. He chooses personally 12 people, his inner circle. Maybe it's like, his cabinet, his team, his aides maybe. And then we hear that he calls them his friends. And Jesus chooses this group of 12. And I think sometimes we just know that, don't we? If you've ever been to anything through Sunday school, Jesus and the 12 disciples. And we sort of maybe forget just how diverse a group they were, just how unsuited they were to be friends of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And boy, were they an odd mix. There weren't priests in that group. There weren't any popular, trendy leaders. There were no real experts, and there was definitely no royalty. But there were 12 men. And they were each called, they were each chosen, each picked by Jesus. And the thing that excites me is, it wasn't just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It was 12 that became a group. They became a team. They worked together. And those individuals became a group. And boy, what a diverse group they were. So we got a tax collector, and in that culture, he was a traitor, really. A turncoat, somebody who would have been despised by his people. Then we get a radical, a zealot, someone who probably would have been really happy to incite others to violence. We get some fishermen, probably relatively uneducated, not hugely well read, not well travelled across the world, and probably not that rich. We get a couple of brothers who are so prone to speak before they think, they're actually nicknamed the Sons of Thunder. We get a money man who probably was stealing from the joint purse, and whose love for money actually led him to betray Jesus. We get a man who Jesus knew would buckle under pressure and even deny knowing him. We actually get a man who was prejudiced about people from where they came from, particularly people from Nazareth. And yet Jesus saw this bunch of people, and that's not what he saw. He didn't see an angry pair of brothers. He didn't see a guy that was going to let him down. He didn't see someone who grabbed money. He saw 12 individuals who he knew he could pick and choose and work with. He picked them, he trained them, and he made them his friends. If it doesn't inspire that Jesus wants to pick you to be his friend today, please come and talk to me afterwards, because it really, really should. Jesus wants to pick you to be his friend. He's going to pick you and equip you, which is what he did for the disciples. And after Jesus' death and resurrection, those group, by then 11, boy, did they change the world, because he'd chosen them and they were able to do what he wanted them to do. That's all I'm going to talk about this morning. I haven't quite finished, but that is all I'm going to talk about this morning, is that you are picked. You are chosen. Jesus wants you in his team. Jesus asks us to join his family. But when we join his family, there's an awful lot that comes with it. Marcus talked a bit about joining family last week, but when you join a family, there are all sorts of benefits that come with it. I was quite disappointed my husband wasn't going to take a bullet for me this morning, just for the children. But, when you join a family, there is that loyalty, that you are valued, whatever, that you're accepted in that family, whatever you do. And that's what faith in Jesus is like. You're going to belong to his people, belong to his church worldwide. And actually you can, and we want you to belong here at Living Well. Jesus is calling us, I think, this year to do amazing things. He's asking us to be conspicuously brave. He's asking us to move out in Elsham. But he's chosen us to do that. And if I look around the room, there are some people I might think, I'm glad I've got that one. Actually, Linda's not here, but I was going to say I'm glad Linda's here because she'll sort all the money out. She'll be really good at that. Oh, and I'm glad this one's here because they'll be able to do that. And I'm glad this one. But actually, it doesn't matter what skills you might have or not have. It doesn't matter about your previous life experiences. It doesn't matter how clever we are. It doesn't even matter what we look like. And you know what? It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. It doesn't matter if your past is something you're ashamed of or something you know that you didn't do well. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter if you're a bit of a son of thunder, if your temperament's a little bit on the challenging side. And it doesn't matter about your family background, your job, what you do. Because Jesus isn't looking at that. He's looking at our hearts. And he's saying, I choose you. I choose you to be part of what's happening this year. I choose you to be part of my family. We are absolutely chosen. Some verses in John 15 say this. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. Jesus chose us. He's choosing us. Why? So that we can go and bear fruit that will last for eternity. And when he chooses us, he calls us, and there's some lovely verse in Isaiah 43 that says, fear not, I've redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. I'm actually not very good with names. And I get people's names wrong. I mean, I've only got 2 granddaughters, and why on earth their mother gave them both names with L, I don't know. Lily and Layla, I can't even get those 2 the right way round. I'm not great with names. And I have a little book that I use for work, because I have to look in it before I go to a meeting, because I know I'll have met someone before, and I won't remember their name. So this week I met some new people. I've got to really think about this, and they were called Peter Wood and Steve Crouch. And I just wanted to keep calling him Peter Crouch. So I've got them in my little book now, because I'm really, really bad with names. But I love it when people call my name. So I loved it when Layla was like calling Grandad. I know that's not his name, but it's what she calls him this morning. And I love it if people call me by my name. If there's a relationship there, even though I'm bad about it. But Jesus calls you by name. He knows you. He created you. He formed you. You are his, and he calls you by name. But it said in that John 15 that he calls us and he appoints us. I don't know if you've ever been appointed to an official position. Sometimes we appoint leaders at church, and we appoint roles. And we see, don't we, sometimes lots of pomp and ceremony on the television if people are appointed to roles. The sort of being appointed as president somewhere or prime minister, huge occasion, and people are appointed. They're officially given something to do. Well, we've been chosen and appointed. And when Jesus spoke to his 12, he said to them that they were authorized as well. They'd got the authority to do what he was calling them to. When he sent out 72 of his close friends, of his disciples, he gave them a list of things that they'd got authority to do, to overcome the devil, to deal with all sorts of situations that were going on in the world. In Luke 10, he tells them, I'm giving you this authority. When we read what we call the Great Commission, go ye into all the world, it's what we've been appointed to do. We're chosen because there's a job to do. Chosen, called, appointed, and authorized. I read something this week that said we're saved to serve. I thought, well, that's quite good, because that's what we're going to be talking about, belonging and serving, but we're saved to serve. And it's really easy for us to think of service just being, and we need it to be this as well, just being involved practically. I had a lovely cup of tea this morning, and my grandchildren had rather a lot of cakes that they were served this morning. You've just been served by people taking the communion round. But Jesus wants us to serve him. Out of a heart of everything we do, serving him. And us becoming more like him. And we're chosen and called because Jesus wants relationship with us. And that relationship, out of that comes the fact that we then belong and we want to serve. I think if I asked you if you've ever led someone to faith in Jesus, whether it was exciting, I really, really hope you thought it was. We're saved to serve. We're saved to lead others to that point of knowing Jesus. Actually, the Bible's really clear. We're also saved to serve the poor and the needy in our society. And really clear through the New Testament, on lots of occasions, we're saved to serve each other, to support each other, to care for each other, to have compassion for each other. So we go back to that thought that Jesus calls all sorts of people, and I think, well, I'm not very good at certain things. I mean, I'm really bad at spatial awareness, like really bad. So if you needed me to help design something or sort something in church, it's not going to happen. And I'm sure he doesn't want to admit it, but there might just be something Joe's not good at. He's struggling to think, but there might be. Ironing. Joe's not good at ironing. Because actually we are all different. And if it relied on us, we probably wouldn't get everything done really well. But I love the fact, and I'm excited by the fact, that when Jesus calls us, he equips us. Actually, he takes us way beyond what we thought we could do. He gives us everything we need for what he's calling us to do. Despite the part we have to play, Jesus will make sure that he supplies what we need, because we've got a role to undertake in serving and in growing his kingdom. I don't know if you feel part of this church. I don't know if you feel part of the wider family of God. But when we come to faith in Jesus, we do become part of that wider family of God. And the Bible talks in Corinthians about that being like a body. That we all have different roles and different parts, different functions to do, different gifts, different abilities. And it says in verse 27 of 1 Corinthians 12, you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. Each of us is needed. When was the last time you felt needed? God needs you. He wants you. He calls you. And he needs you. It says in verse 25 there that there should be no division in the body, but that each of the parts should have equal concern for one another. God wants us to be a united body, a unified body, and not divided, and to care for each other. There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but the same God works all of them in all men. Now to each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given. Why? For the common good. God's giving each of us his Spirit for the common good. Each of us called to display Jesus. Each of us called to work for him and each of us called for the good of the wider family of Christ. Sometimes you can't imagine being used by anybody in a positive way because of how you feel about yourself. And I guess that when Simon Peter denied Christ, he didn't feel too great about himself. You know, he'd let him down. He'd come to a point where he wouldn't even admit to being a few hours earlier with Christ. And yet we just turn a couple of pages in our Bible and Simon is speaking as Peter to the multitude and telling people about Jesus. Sometimes we don't feel great about ourselves, but that's okay because God wants to change that. And whatever it is that we've done or we feel we're lacking or is hurting us or influencing us, God wants to just turn a couple of pages and show you how he can use you for his purposes, how he can heal that hurt, how he can deal with whatever it is that means you think you can't belong and you can't be used. More than anything today, I want to know that each of you feel you belong to Jesus. But I really want you to feel like you belong here at Living Well, whether that's Living Well campus here at Whitfield or in Elsham. And that each of us know that we're important to each other. Whatever it is that God gives us to do, your role might be different to mine, your responsibility different to mine, but we want you to belong. Jesus wants us to belong to his family. And we can move on from how we felt in the past, and we can be part of what God's doing in the future. And why? Because despite what you think about yourself, it's not about you, it's about him. It's not about what talents I do or don't have. It's not about my character. Thankfully, it's not about my appearance. It's not about my skill level. It's not even about what I've got expertise in. It's about what Jesus sees and a willingness for him to use my heart. And when he does, he then gives us the strength to do what he's calling us to do, the ability to be involved in the way he's asking. He fills us with his spirit and gives us gifts that we just can use for his good. And we've sort of become experts then, but not because of us, because of him. And more than anything, Jesus just wants to pour his love out. More than anything, Jesus just says, it's not about you, it's about me and how much I love you. I'm glad that God looks differently to the world. I'm glad that it's not like being at school where only one or two people get the year prize or become the head teacher and you sort of can predict who it's likely to be. I'm glad that God doesn't look like children in a playground where you see one's left out or, group of 3 girls, never great because 2 are going to be happy and 1 not. I'm glad that God doesn't look like the captain of a team or like an employer. I'm glad that God looks and says, I can use you. I can equip you. I can appoint you. And I will choose you. And I love that what happens in church probably doesn't happen anywhere else. And that he puts an odd bunch of people together. So we had the pleasure this week in our life group of someone new come in. Really exciting, okay? So new. And actually, one of the things she said to me was, this is such a diverse group of people in your life group. It is. So we've got different backgrounds, different skills, different intellectual levels, different emotional levels, different jobs, different family situations. There is almost not 2 people in the life group with the same sort of backgrounds, jobs, interests. Some of them have got the same interests. We've got 2 car mad guys, but the group are diverse. And yet, when I look around the room with them on a Tuesday night, that's not what's holding them together. Faith in Jesus is. Caring and having compassion is. And I'm really glad that when I look around this room, there's a real diverse group of people. Different skills, different backgrounds, different problems, different capabilities. And yet Jesus says, I'm putting you together to make something better in the group. Maybe you still don't think you're good enough to serve. Well, maybe you don't really think God can equip you or appoint you. So let's just look at some other people who God really worked miracles through, used in amazing ways, and let's just remember what they were. You might identify with one of them. You might think, oh, I'm doing all right, actually. I'm none of them. But whatever, these are the people God used. Noah, who was a drunk. Abraham, who was extremely old. Age is not a barrier to service. Jacob, who was a liar. Moses stuttered. Isaac was a daydreamer. Poor Leah was a little bit ugly. Joseph was abused and went through all sorts of situations. Gideon was afraid. Samson was definitely a womanizer. Timothy was really young. Jonah ran away. Rahab was a prostitute. David, he gets a double mention, adulterer and a murderer. Elijah was pretty depressed to the point of feeling suicidal. Job went bankrupt, lost everything. Naomi was a widow, and Peter denied Christ. Don't tell me God can't use you guys. They're the sort of people God can use when their hearts are willing. They're the people that God's saying, whatever it is, sitting here today, I want you to belong to my family. I want you to belong to Living Well, and I want you to be involved in the next year in my plans for this area. But maybe you don't even know Jesus. Maybe you don't even belong to Jesus. You don't have to go away today not belonging to Jesus. I would love the most exciting thing that happens to me today to be that I led someone to Christ. I have got an exciting day. My niece, who has desperately wanted to be a mummy, is coming to see me today, and she's 4.5 months pregnant. I think that's going to be, or I thought that would be the most exciting bit of my day. It won't. If one of you wants to come to faith in Jesus, and I lead you to that, that will outshine seeing my niece this afternoon. Because Jesus wants to call you. Maybe you don't feel like you belong here. That makes me really sad. I want you to feel like you belong here. And we want to help you feel like you belong here. We'd love to connect you to a small group if you don't already belong to one. We'd love you to get involved in one of the teams that serves, because that will help you feel belonging more. Because I think the tough bit for us is, this year, Jesus is calling us to do things. And Jesus always has bigger vision than us. And it's always a bigger thing than maybe we've imagined that he's going to call us to. And this morning, my challenge is, if we belong to him, are we then willing to go with him wherever he takes us? You know, Isaiah says in Isaiah 6, he just says, "Here I am, Lord, send me." Whatever it is that God's got for you this year, are you willing to say to him, "Here I am, Lord, send me"? Isaiah said it, he meant it. He said it in context because he just had the most amazing vision of God and understanding of who God was and God's plan. But God was his life. He'd seen God, he knew God, and he knew that actually what he needed to do was respond and say, "Here I am, Lord, send me." And he was ready to do what God called him to. Abraham was similar. When God called him to go, he went. He made mistakes on the way, but he went. Paul, once he was converted, he went for the rest of his life wherever God called him to go. Samuel heard from God and responded as he was asked. And you know, even the disciples, where we started, the 12 of them, they left everything they had and followed Jesus. I don't know whether Jesus is asking you to leave everything, but I do know he's asking us to go on a journey with him this year. And they went, those disciples went. Why? Because they just met Jesus. And the focus of him took away all of the peripheral, and they concentrated on him. They belonged to him, and so they were ready to go with him. This year, as we go on a journey, an exciting journey, as a diverse group of odd people, God's saying, "I've got something for you all to do. I want you to belong here. No matter who you are, no matter your past, no matter what you think you can or can't do, God's calling us to belong to him and to this place."